I feel like I need to be a little bit a devil's advocate, because again, it's true that you need to have that self-awareness to make those changes, but many times people feel that it is out of their control, that the difficulties that they're having communicating come out of, I'm going to just go right back to it again, the blaming it on the ex. So let's just talk about that a little bit, because one of the biggest issues for couples getting along after they have parted and they still have to deal with each other because they have a kid together is residual anger. So I think it's an interesting idea to do something called exit counseling. Now, I don't think you did that, but okay. Exit counseling is a little bit like couples therapy. Except the goal for the therapist is not to get you guys to agree and compromise and continue your relationship, right? Like couples counseling would be. The goal is to get you guys to split apart and to air all the grievances that you need to air in a safe room, right? With a therapist sort of moderating between the two of you. And to really come to terms with the end of the relationship and where you see yourself, not so much where you see yourself going, but how are you going to relate to one another once the split is official. And again, this is really important when you have a child, because if you've still got issues that you are furious about, they're going to manifest themselves in many different ways. And, it's an interesting thing I learned recently. A lot of couples feel, and I'm sure many people watching can agree, that if we don't fight in front of the child, then everything's fine. We're not harming the child. And that's an interesting thing if you go into counseling about it, or if you go to any kind of family therapy, they will tell you that it doesn't matter if you do it in front of the child or without the child knowing. A child is so perceptive to the way their parents are feeling and the unspoken communication between them that they will know intuitively that you guys hate each other.
True. It's like my parents, but they fought in front of us. But we knew, no matter what, there was like you could feel the anger seething from across the room. You know?
Right.
There's no way around it.
They can tell by the way they interact and just the way they speak to each other. And and every child is going to overhear that phone conversation that you didn't think they heard, right?
Of course.
That happens all the time. Or sometimes you can't help yourself, sometimes your kids may be in the back of the car and you're on the phone and you're like, and you're screaming at them. You're like, "Are you kidding me?"
Well, you can help yourself.
Yes, it's true.
You have to kind of step back and be like.
But it happens.
Of course
it happens that people slip up and
Yeah.
they do communicate harshly in front of their child, especially if something serious is going down that you're having a problem with. So that was one of my recommendations, was to do some form of.
Does that exist, exit counseling, or did you just make that up? Is that a real thing? No, I'm being serious. Do people actually...
I don't know if it's like a universally used term, exit counseling.
Yeah. Well,
but if you went to... Well, hold on. If you went to a couples counselor and you said, well, it could be the couples counselor that you might have been seeing. Many people see... And this is kind of a funny thing, because don't you think couples counseling gets a bad rap? Like, don't you think, like, people go to couples counseling and then inevitably break up? Do you know why that is?
I think it has to do with a lot of counselors, man. I went to counseling before my marriage ended, and it was like the worst experience I've ever had in my life.
Okay.
And that's not against all counselors. You guys have to go to my website if you want more background on me and my upbringing and my connection with counselors, my whole entire life, psychologists, shrinks, whatever.
Yes.
I had a horrible experience. I almost felt like, I'm not gonna lie. Towards the end of my marriage, I was the one trying to hold it together to see if there was a possibility of just, maybe. It could be fixed. I wanted to give it one last shot before I called it quits after almost a decade. And when we got into therapy and counseling, and I had a horrible experience with the marriage counselor. She kept looking at her watch the whole entire time, and it was just, it was very unprofessional.
Okay.
But I don't think that, obviously, the marriage was going to end regardless. But yeah, I think there's a reason why a lot of counseling gets a bad rap, because I think it sucks most of the time, man. I mean, like, in my experience, I think if something is going to end, it's going to end,
Okay.
you know?
Well, let me interject there. I also did not have a good experience with couples counseling. But that doesn't mean that you won't, or that you can't find
Yeah.
a great counselor. I mean, there are people out there who are really good at doing this and really care about it. And don't look at their watch. That has got to be like the worst thing.
She wanted the money, man. She was just like, well, you know, I was like, listen, man.
That has got to be the
lady.
worst thing to do during a therapy session.
And I had to call her out on it. For those of you who don't know, I actually studied psychology when I was younger. And so I'm like questioning this woman, like, come on, man, what are you doing? So like, you know, so anyway, yeah. So Jane's right, it's not everybody.
And you may see me check my watch. It's certainly not out of boredom, but I do have to time the show. Okay.
We have kids, which is what this is all about.
Yeah, but this show is, you know,
not with each other though.
Is 29 minutes. Okay?
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Okay, well then I'll be quiet and you go.
Okay, so what I wanted to say about couples counseling is that, I forgot, sort of. I was going to say that you could call a counselor up and say, I need a couple of sessions to help my partner and I kind of extricate from the relationship. That a couples counselor would be certainly willing to do that. Another way you could do that is with someone who's a private mediator. A lot of times mediators work as a parenting coordinator, and they can sort of help you navigate those things as well if you find a good mediator. I'll talk about mediation in a second. But the other thing about couples counseling that I was about to say is that I think one of the reasons it does get a bad rap is because a lot of people go into counseling too late. That's pretty much the bottom line. People feel like couples counseling is sort of the last resort. And a lot of people, and rightly so, feel that their marriage deserves you know, sort of like a last, like you said, kind of holding it together. Let's make every effort we can to make sure that this is really and truly unworkable because we have a child or children together.
And plus it's the whole stigma, like, of you know, getting divorced in society. A lot of people don't want, I think a lot of that has to do with it,
Do you think there's still a stigma?
Oh, people are ashamed, man. People are ashamed.
Oh,
they
I'm
are.
so
I was
proud
ashamed.
of it.
I was ashamed at first.
Really?
Yeah, I was very ashamed. But then I realized after a while, after I did some soul searching, that it had to happen at that time, and I had to move on, and she had to move on.
All right. Well, and I should clarify. I don't want to say I'm proud of it. Like it's not like it's some accomplishment or anything, but it never worried me. And I think it's a little bit about your perspective. You know, there is a sort of a cliche image of like the divorced. Like that would be me, the divorced woman with 2 kids, you know?
The 58%.
Yeah.
I didn't want to be part of the 58%. That was more of it.
Well, but there's a difference too between women, because I would be seen in a sort of vulnerable position. Like I would be in a position where I couldn't take care of myself. Some people said to me oh, you know, you're really lucky you didn't end up in some basement apartment somewhere. Like that, those kind of sad stories that happen. Or
who are you talking to? Somebody like 100 years old or something? Like this is 2009, man. Are you talking to your grandpa or something?
Like women can't, you know, exist on their own and
what
take care of themselves.
What are you gonna do now?
Right. I know, but you said it yourself that there's a stigma. I don't feel that there's a stigma, and I'll tell you why. Because we all know that half of every marriage ends in divorce. It's a statistic.
Let's be honest. Yeah. Every marriage ends in divorce. Just get straight to the point. It's not going to work.
That is not true.
I'm just joking.
That is not true.
I'm trying to make light of something.
There are lots of people, and you know what? When I was married, I paid really close attention to the marriages that I thought were really healthy.
You have to model yourself, or kind of you learn from them.
Well, yeah. I mean, I would look
at. Just a little too late in your case.
I would look at it was too late. I mean, there were certain things I was like, wow, that would be awesome if my partner and I could do X, Y, Z. Like I watched this other family with kids. they were really a good unit. They
Yeah.
spent a lot of time together, they gave each other space when they needed it.
Yeah.
They did things like the dad would take all the kids for the entire day and go visit his sister or something, so the mom could get a break,
Yeah.
and vice versa.
You have to do that. There
Yeah.
has to be teamwork
This
or
kind
it
of
will never
teamwork,
work.
that's what I noticed with them. They had great teamwork, they had great communication, and as a result, they are a healthy married couple. So I kind of looked at them and thought, wow, that's a great role model for how to be, but it also held the mirror to my own relationship and what I did not have. So, you know, you can either try to make those changes, or you can say, I'm never going to be in this particular relationship, I won't ever have that. So it's time to move on and see if I can replicate that in a different way. And that's entirely possible.